Hello everyone, welcome to the Law Gurukul Initiative Law Awareness Series. Today we have a session on fundamental rights. The theme is fundamental rights and we are covering fundamental rights with our presentations, and we have some speakers they will present on the same topic. Fundamental rights is enshrined in part 3rd of Indian Constitution. In part 3rd, it will be covering Article 12 to Article 35. There are 6 main fundamental rights. The fundamental rights are 6 which are given to us, that are right to equality, right to freedom, right to religion, right against exploitation, cultural and educational rights, and right to constitutional remedies. We will be covering all these rights in sequence wise according to their articles. Article 12 and 13 says that fundamental rights are available only against the state. And in Article 13, it is clearly mentioned that any law which will come in derogation with fundamental rights shall be void. So it helps us to understand the significance of fundamental rights. Now, with our first speaker, Pooja Maheshwari, we will be going to understand that right to equality.
Thank you, Riddhi. So today's my topic is right to equality. Right to equality provide equal treatment to everyone before the law. Discrimination prohibit discrimination on the grounds of various prohibit discrimination on various grounds. Abolition of titles and untouchability, provide equal opportunity in the matter of employment and opportunity. Before going deep into this topic, I just want to say before going deep into this topic, one should know the types of equality. This type of equality are also mentioned in the preamble too. So the type of equality are the natural, social, civil, political, economical, legal. Right to equality is a fundamental right which is enriched in the Part 3 of Indian Constitution. So this is very important to understand what is the right entail and includes. So for this, I just want to share my slides. All right, is my slides are visible to you all? We'll cover Article 14 to Article 18 under this. Right to equality listed under Article 14 to 18 of Indian Constitution. The word fundamental suggests that these rights are so important that the Constitution has separately listed them and made special provision for their protection. These fundamental rights can only be changed by amending the Constitution. Article 14 provides general principles, whereas Article 15, 16, 17, and 18 provides particular applications. In my upcoming slides, I also mentioned some of my amendments. So moving towards Article 14, that is equality before law. The state shall not deny to any person equality before law or equal protection of law within the territory of India. Under this particular article, we'll cover rule of law, equality before the law, equal protection of law. So rule of law, D.C. Roy in his book mentioned the definition of rule of law, which states that among equal, the law should be equal and should be equally administered, that like should be treated alike, which means that governor, officers, or the common people all are equal. Moving towards the equality before law or the equal protection of law. For this, I just want to give the illustration. For an example, take two boys, the boy A and the boy B. Boy A is of 10 years and boy B is of 5 years. Both the boys are providing with same hospital facilities, love, care, affection, same education facility. But according to equality before law, the boy A and the boy B will provide same amount of food, which means that boy A will get 4 chapatis, then boy B will also get 4 chapatis too. But according to equal protection of law, the boy A and the boy B will get the chapatis according to their need, which means that the boy A and boy B will get the food according to their needs. So, covering the definition of these two, equality before law, among equal, law should be equal and should be equally applied. The object behind the right to equality before law is that a state shall not discriminate one individual, as I mentioned in my illustration. Equal protection of law, all persons in similar circumstance shall be treated alike both in privileges conferred and liability imposed. As I discussed in my illustration, that boy A and boy B will get food according to their needs. So after this, I should say that Article 14 talks about equality in two sense, the negative sense and in the positive sense. The negative sense, that is Article 14(1)(a), equality before law, prohibit unequal treatment, and the Article 14(2), equal protection of law, that is in positive sense, demand equal treatment. Okay, so moving forward, Article 14 provides reasonable classification but prohibit class legislation. Classification are based on intelligible differentia and rational nexus. So we'll understand this by an illustration again. So take two class students, the class A, the class 12th and the class 5th student. Principal want to test the student of the school, so he circulated the question paper. So after this, what the principal do? He'll differentiate the student of the class 12th and the class 5th. It means that he'll classify the student of class 12th and class 5th, and according to the classification, he'll provide the question paper according to their level. Which means when he classify the student among class 12th and class 5th, which is intelligible differentia, and when he provide the question paper according to their level, that is rational nexus, which means that class 12th student will get the uh, a question paper according to their level, and class 5th student should get the question paper according to their level. But somehow this old doctrine was a very negative sense and restrictive approach. So in the case of E.P. Royappa versus state of Tamil Nadu, there was an introduction of the new concept of doctrine, which says that equality is a dynamic concept. It cannot be cribbed or confined with traditional limits. So according to the new doctrine, equality before law is rule of law plus natural justice, which means that according to new doctrine, equality before law composed of rule of law, and also it also combined with natural justice. Covering the case of Menka Gandhi was a unit of India. In this case, it talk about the reasonableness. It says that reasonableness is an essential element of equality or non-arbitrariness. From the case of State of Bombay versus F.N. Balsara, new doctrine target arbitrariness and support reasonableness. It says that equality and arbitrariness are sworn enemies. If anything is arbitrariness, it opposes equality. Obviously, if anything is arbitrariness, obviously if anything is arbitrariness, it opposes equality. If in what happened in this case, that some of the engineering the people are taking interviews of the engineers according to orbitness, which means that if a class having 50 students and I took only and I took four people randomly, obviously it was unequal. Therefore, in this case, it was stated that if anything is orbitness, it opposes equality. After all this thing, we'll have the concept of golden triangle. What is golden triangle? The combination of Article 14, 19, and Article 21. Moving toward to next article, that is Article 15, prohibition of discrimination. No discrimination on the grounds of religion, race, caste, sex, place of birth. 15 ones talk about the state shall not discriminate against any citizen on such grounds. State 15.2 talks about prohibition of the citizen as well as state to make such discrimination with regard to access to shops, hotel, public entertainment, wells, etc. 15.3 talks about empower the state to make special provision for protection of women and children. 15.4 talks about enable the state to make special provision for the protection of interest of backward classes, and thus it is an exception to Article 15. So if I say that Article 15.1 and 15.2 are somehow a negative approach, and Article 15.3 and 15.4 somehow a positive approach, because it empower the state to make special provision for women, children, backward classes. Okay, it is very interesting to know, you guys, that backward class word is not defined in any of the in our constitution. So where this backward class word comes from? Actually, what happened is from the Kalekar Commission was set up to define this backward class word in a constitution, but they are not getting the perfect definition of backward class. So still now we are not having a perfect definition of backward class. In my upcoming slide, I'll tell you what's the who will cover in backward classes. Clause 15.4 was added by Constitution First Amendment Act 1951 as a consequence of the decision of Supreme Court in the case of State of Madras versus Champakam Doyarajan. In that case, Madras government had reserved seat in the State Medical and Engineering College for different communities in certain portions on the basis of religion, race, and caste. The law was challenged in the Supreme Court, and Supreme Court held that void because it classifies students on the basis of caste and religion, irrespective of the merit. So after this case, it was very important to amend Article 15, and therefore Clause 15.4 was added in the Constitution, which states that special provision for the protection of the interest of backward class. Okay, so under Clause 15.4, two things are to be determined. the backward class, and the limit of reservation. So who are considered backward class? The social and educational people, the social and educationally backward class, which means that if I'm considering someone backward, I'll see the social and educational status both. Secondly, the limit of reservation. In the case of Balaji versus State of Mysore, AIR 1973, backwardness should not be socially and educationally backward. Poverty, occupation, place of habitation may also be relevant factor to be taken into consideration. अब इस केस में इन्होंने बोला कि social और education backward जरूरी नहीं है. Poverty, occupation, place of habitation आप और भी relevant factors ले सकते हैं. Secondly, the reservation should not exceed 50%. Okay. So अब हम देखेंगे ये 50% reservation जो है वो कब तक चलता है. Periyakkurum versus State of Tamil Nadu, the government should not proceed on the basis that once a class is considered as backward, it should continue as backward class all time. Which means that अगर बैकवर्ड क्लास अगर कोई क्लास एक टाइम पे बैकवर्ड है उस टाइम पे, तो ज़रूरी नहीं है कि आप उसको रिजर्वेशन या आप उसको रिजर्वेशन पूरे टाइम पे दो. इफ इन केस उसका बैकवर्ड क्लास का अगर लिमिट खत्म हो गया तो आप उसको रिजर्वेशन देना खत्म भी कर सकते हो. Moving towards 15.5, reservation in private, aided and unaided institution, the Constitution 93 Amendment 2005 inserted clause 5. Also, the Constitution 103rd Amendment has amended two fundamental rights, that is Article 15 and Article 16. So, and after Article 15 and Article 16, which states that the state is now empowered to provide a maximum 10% reservation for EWS, economical weaker sections. All right, moving towards to Article 16. अभी तक हमने देखा था भी वो 50% जो था वो exceed नहीं होना चाहिए reservation. अब हम आगे देखते हैं कि आगे क्या होता है. Article 16, it guarantees the equality of opportunity in public employment for all citizens and says that no citizen shall be discriminated on the basis of race, caste, sex, descent, place of birth, and residence. Article 16.1 talks about the scope. It talks about the equality of opportunity in the matter relating to employment and appointments. 16.2 talks about 7 grounds that the race, caste, sex, descent, place of birth, and residence. 16.3 talks about the reservation on the basis of residence. 16.4 talks about the reservation of backward class. If the backward class does not have adequate representative, it also includes SCs and STs. Moving toward the case of Balaji versus State of Mysore, in this case, the question arises where 16.4 applies. What is 16.4 talk about? The 16.4 talk about the reservation to backward classes. So in this case, Balaji versus State of Mysore, there was a question arise where the 16.4 applies. The court comes up with two conditions. 16.4 applies to backward class and the backward class should मतलब जो backward class constitute करेंगे उनको socially and educationally दोनों तरफ से backward class होना चाहिए. Secondly, not having adequate representative in the service under state. Moving toward the second case, the Devdasan versus Union of India, a famous case of carry forward rule case, talk about the backlog vacancy and also state that if reservation exceed 50%, carry forward rule becomes invalid. What are backlog vacancies? What happened initially that the state booked some of the seats for the backward class people, but and if these seats are unfilled, these seats will continue in the upcoming years. So what happened after years, the reservation of the seats will become 60%. So this case comes that Devdas with the Union of India talk about backlog vacancies and also state that if reservation exceed 50%, carry forward rule become invalid. Coming towards the next case, that is Indra Samani versus Union of India Mandal case. What happened in this case? The Mandal Commission was set up by BP Mandal, and in this case, they talk about the SEBC, social economic backward classes. There were so many judgments in this case. I'll take only 3 to 4 judgments which are regarding to Article 16. The first is 27% reservation to SCBC. Second is reservation are confined to appointment and not to the promotion. Reservation सिर्फ आपको appointments में मिलेगा, आपको promotions में नहीं मिलता आपका. Thirdly, the reservation should not exceed 50%. अभी तक हम लोग ये पढ़ते आ रहे हैं कि reservation 50% से exceed नहीं होना चाहिए. But after this case, there were certain amendments made. The amendment of 77, in which 16.4A added enable to continue reservation and promotion for SCs and STs. हमने क्या पढ़ा था कि मंडल केस में हमने पढ़ा था कि रिजर्वेशन आर कन्फाइंड टू अपॉइंटमेंट एंड नॉट टू द प्रमोशन, बट 16.4A के अमेंडमेंट से हुआ ये कि इनेबल टू कंटिन्यू रिजर्वेशन एंड प्रमोशन फॉर SC एंड ST. 81st Amendment Act 16(4) be added ended 50% ceiling on reservation for SCs and ST. जो हमने मंडल केस में पढ़ा था, that is a third point, reservation should not exceed 50%. After 81st Amendment, that 50% ceiling of reservation for SC and ST ended and backlog vacancies ended. Moving towards our clause 16(5), reservation and religious institution, which grants that for to work in a religious institution if that religious institution grant a particular religion. So this is not violative of Article 16. All right, moving towards our Article 17, that is untouchability, abolition of untouchability. It is very interesting to know that you all guys, that untouchability also does not mention in our Indian Constitution. Constitutional framers put this, gave this word untouchability, but does not interpret or define it. So, in the case of Jai Singh versus Union of India and Devarajan versus B. Padmana, the word held that the word untouchability is comes in inverted commas in Article 17. So the word untouchability does not define grammatically or liberal interpretation. The meaning of this word is to be derived from the historical approach or historical practice. Therefore, the word untouchability here means a caste-based untouchability. Jyotiba Phule, Ambedkar, and Mahatma Gandhi works on the untouchability. So what this article talks about, the article talks about abolish untouchability and forbid its practice in any form. In the exercise power conferred in Article 35 and to give amended Article 17, Parliament enacted the Untouchability Offence Act 1955, renamed as Civil Right Protection Act 1955. I'll just want to give a brief description about these two acts. What happened in Untouchability Offence Act 1955, the provision of this Untouchability Offence Act 1955 was not too satisfied. So there was a committee set, the Committee on Untouchability, Economic and Educational Development of SCs. So after this committee make the Act of Civil Right Protection Act 1955. Therefore, we say that the Untouchability Offence Act 1955 renamed as Civil Right Protection Act 1955. Moving towards our last article, that is Article 18, abolition of titles. Prohibit the according to Article 18 prohibit the state to confer titles on anybody, whether a citizen or a non-citizen. Exception, military and academic distinction are however exempted. Academic distinction include Bharat Ratna, Padma Vibhushan, etc. And this was the case of Balaji Raghavan versus Union of India. What happened in the British era? Basically, people are getting their name having prefix like king or queen. So when the constitutional framers says that if we use this prefix like king or queen, this was inequality. This was against the equality. So they put the Article 18 and say that it will prohibit the state to confer titles on anybody, whether a citizen or a non-citizen. But still, there are some of the exceptions, military and academic distinction, because Bharat Ratna, Padma Vibhushan are not the titles; they are their achievements. Okay, so this is all about my articles 14 to 18. There's something very interesting to know in my next slide. What is your opinion about the equality and equity? I get this image from the Google that I hope you'll better understand about from this image what is the difference between equality and equity. In the equality, all the three people are getting equal treatment, but in equity, the person who need will get the equal treatment. I'll end my slides. I'll end my this topic by putting you all guys question that what was more better, is it right to equality or right to equity? And thank you.
Hello everyone. So now we are going to discuss about this topic, that is right to freedom. Right to freedom is mentioned in Article 19, 20, 21 and 22. As this image itself depicts that what I mean to say by right to freedom is. Now let us move further to know about what these articles talk about right to freedom. And how much important do you think this right to freedom fundamental right is? Article 19 talk about right to freedom, particularly this word. Under this, there are 6 fundamental rights. Talking about introduction of Article 19, it tells about it is available only to citizens, guarantees 6 fundamental freedoms, right to property was there in Article 19(1)(f), but after 44th Amendment, it got omitted and now it is mentioned in Article 300A and it is a constitutional right now. This Article 19 gives us 6 fundamental rights. All talk about right to freedom. That what are freedom this article gives us, we will talk about it. But the most important thing is, all the fundamental rights are not absolute right. What I mean by saying absolute word is, they have certain restrictions with them, the reasonable restrictions. But the Constitution did not let us to think ourselves that what we think of reasonable word is. So there are grounds itself given in these articles, which only on that grounds we can apply those reasonable restrictions. So Article 19(1)(a) and Article 19(2) talk about freedom of speech and expression. I mentioned this article itself, this only 19(1)(a), because it has its own significance in a broader way. What I mean to say is, freedom of speech and expression is very commonly heard and very important fundamental right for all of us. If we want to criticize the government, then we need the freedom of speech and expression. If we want to say anything that is going on right now by the COVID, we can say, this is because of this right only. Otherwise, we will be in jail. So guys, you know that how much importance this freedom of speech and expression is. Now the question come here is freedom of press. What do we understand by freedom of press? Do we India provide something other things to press? Something more freedom of speech and expression? No. This is a very good, this is a question also, and this is also a thing to be clear of, that India provides a freedom of press equal to that what we have as a citizen. So press do not have a special kind of right in the freedom of speech and expression. There is one thing, if we have a freedom of speech, that means we have a freedom to speak what we think of. And we have to freedom of express by any kind of actions, like by my hands, I am talking to you. So this is expression. By all these things, we have a freedom. But these also have a restriction. You can't go and abuse someone or abusive words. So these are some kinds of restrictions given in this freedom. But the thing is, if you have a freedom to speak, do we have to freedom to be silent? So yes, we have a freedom of this. This is mentioned in Bijoy Emmanuel versus State of Kerala case. It is a case of Kerala. It is very interesting case. There are 2 students. They are in the assembly. They are not singing the national anthem, but they are standing in the position as we respect our national anthem, but not singing it. The principal, suspended those two students because they are not singing it as a matter of disrespect to the national anthem. And in High Court, it is also said that this is children have done wrong, and that's why it is valid. Valid that the school suspended it. Those childs go to Supreme Court, and from there we got to know that we have a freedom of silence. So the Supreme Court said that those 2 students belong to a type of a community where they are allowed to they are allowed to do sing the things or do something only on to the side of a god, for the god only. So they are not singing the national anthem, but they are not disrespecting it too, because they are standing in the position that is like respecting the so that Supreme Court said that we have a freedom of silence too. Unless we are not disrespecting it, it is not wrong to not singing it. So from there, we got to know about this. There are restrictions which I talked about. What are those restrictions? So these are the restrictions. Sovereignty and integrity of India, that India is supreme, and it's so if that your freedom of speech and expression goes against this, security of state, public order, decency. And for this, these are very common to all other freedoms that are enshrined in Article 19. But decency, defamation in relation to contempt of court, and incitement to offense. These are 4 restrictions which are especially only for this particular 19(1)(a), that is right to speech and expression. The next five fundamental rights that we have from this Article 19 are freedom to assembly, freedom to form association, freedom to movement, freedom of residence, freedom of profession, occupation, trade, and business. So these are given. Now you wonder why if you have a question that why I mentioned here two articles. So this is because 19(1) has some subclauses. That 19(1) subclauses are 1A, 1B, 1C. These are mentioned, there are mentioned these fundamental rights. But in 19(2), 19(3), their restrictions are given. That's why I mentioned these from this. Now, these all we have right from Article 19. They do not want the separate explanation, so I am included only in one slide. So we have a right to form association. We can associate. We can have a right of movement. We can reside anywhere we want to in India. And freedom of profession, occupation, trade and business, and freedom of assembly. Assembly must be peaceful. So there we have restrictions of it for this. The restrictions are equally, approximately common for all of them. That is sovereignty and integrity, public order and morality, interest of public. Here, why I mentioned public order and morality is like freedom of residence. We do have that. But for prostitutes, Supreme Court said that they are restricted because of the public order. So they are restricted to reside in some places because maintaining the public order. So these are restrictions, and how these type of things we put in these cases like this way. Now, we have our next article, that is protection against conviction of offenses. Article 20. Article 20 talk about protection against the conviction of offenses. There are offenses, for that conviction we have some protection. There are three protection mentioned in that. Ex post facto law, Article 21. Double jeopardy, Article 22. Self-incrimination, Article 20, Clause 3. 20 Clause 1, 20 Clause 2, and 20 Clause 3. What these three means, now we will look at that. Article 20 provides us these three rights. Actually, it has safeguard to us. These, we have a protection from these three things. Now, what are those protection is? First, ex post facto law. This means that, suppose I had to steal your clothes. Okay, it was not a crime in January 2021, and I had steal your clothes in January 2021. Now today it is April. Now the law came, and in April, and saying me that now the law came and punishing me for the crime which I had done in January. It was not crime that time. That's why we have protection from these type of things. That means imposes penalties on act previously done. But here be clear that it is only for criminal law. You also notice about CAA, Citizenship Amendment Act. Recently we heard a lot of things about it. This can be possible, the ex post facto law apply there because that was a civil law. But it was not, it never applied to a criminal law because we have a safeguard of it from Article 20. But here a thing is beneficiary provision. Beneficiary provision means that if a person committed a crime, but afterwards there is some amendment made to that law, or the punishment, that the time period of punishment got lessened now. It was of 3 years, but now it was of 2 years. So that was a beneficiary for that person, for that accused. That's why it will be applied there. I hope you understand what I mean by ex post facto law. Now the second thing is double jeopardy protection. It means that nobody should be prosecuted for the same crime 2 times. Okay, this is a Latin maxim, nemo debet bis punibi pro uno delito. This means the same, that nobody will be prosecuted for the same crime for 2 times, and the person must have prosecuted before court or judicial tribunal, not in front of a police. No, it must be prosecuted before court for the same time. Then only this will apply. We have the third in this is prohibition against self-incrimination. This means that self-serving and self-harming are not admissible in evidence, and the Latin maxim for this is nemo tenetur prodire accusare ipsum. What this means is prohibition against self-recrimination. Nobody can force me to say against myself. I can. Nobody can prove. Nobody can force me or you to say to give evidence against yourself, because it is like your right, and this article protect you from that. That's why you heard of a narco test. Judiciary or police one, no one can force you to go to have a narco test, because narco test is like you are giving evidence against yourself. That's why you must have a consent to that. If you consent to that, then only you will go for having a narco test. This is an example of it. This is because of this. So now we have our third, that article 21, the most important article, right to life and personal liberty. It is the most wide area. It has a very important in our segment. It is very important for everything we do. Right to life does not only means that mere animal existence. It is more than that. You just not live here just because you are living here, that's okay, and we are giving you right to life. No, right to life is more than that. So we will talk about right to protection of life and personal liberty. So no person shall be deprived of his personal liberty except according to the procedure established by law, and this is known as the right to life and personal liberty. This is what Article 21 states. It clearly mentioned there the most important words. So let's focus on that. Words are life are right to life, personal liberty, procedure established by law, and this all is called as this is known to as a right to life and personal liberty. Now, what do you understand by just the words right to life, right to that personal liberty? What that personal liberty can mean, and what the word procedure established by law means? This Article 21 was in lot of question, different type of cases, because right to life include many other rights and it is a very wide area. So what are they? That's why many cases came. And for that cases, we have to decide that what the personal liberty word mean, what the procedure established by law mean. That's why these two words are majorly focused in these two cases, A.K. Gopalan and Menka Gandhi case. We will be seeing that one by one. A.K. Gopalan versus Union of India, 1950, talk about mainly about these arguments and held. So what is the case was? It was a challenge some detention act for not giving personal liberty, and that was the case. The main arguments that we have to focus on is violative of Article 19(1)(d), which is very essence of personal liberty. So this come into question. Then second, procedure established by law means the due process of law. Then it was held in this case that procedure established by law do not simply mean as due process of law. Now here due process of law is an American concept and procedure established by law is our concept. Indian concept taken from America but in some blend way. So we blend it. Now what we mean from it is, by simple way, understand it like Supreme Court says in this case that due process of law means that 5 judges in a court deciding everything, that what the law is right and fairness and reasonableness of law. But in India, what we practice is procedure established by law, which means that the law which is established by parliament, and we have to follow that only. This is held in this case. Now the second thing which come in this case means that personal liberty in Article 21 means nothing more than liberty of physical body. That I am free from my physical body restraint, no one restrain me from my physical body. That's why I had a personal liberty. That's what held in this case. Now the second most important case came here is Menka Gandhi versus Union of India, 1978. In this case, Supreme Court overruled the A.K. Gopalan judgment and said that it was observed that personal liberty in Article 21 is of widest amplitude. Article 21 requires following condition to be fulfilled. So personal liberty, that area that is confined by A.K. Gopalan case is now overruled, and the Menka Gandhi case, the Supreme Court said that personal liberty means much more things. So what are they? Article 21 says these things must be followed. We have a law from Parliament, but these things must be followed if you have to go for Article 21. First, there must be a valid law. The law must provide a procedure. The procedure must be just, fair, and reasonable. Satisfy requirement of Article 14 and 19. Must embody the principle of natural justice. So these are the things must be followed. These are the two main cases which give us the meaning of personal liberty and procedure established by law. From these things, we get to know that we have a many more rights. Now, what are they? We have a right to privacy, right to livelihood, right to die with dignity, right to get pollution-free water and air, right to fair and speedy trial, and many more, many others. These all are given by the Supreme Court from a different judgment, and by High Court. Like High Court of Allahabad, Ahmedabad said that it is the right of a person to choose their life partner. So these are the many more rights we can include in this. These are the some I include because it's a very important rights that are given under Article 21, but these are also our fundamental rights. There are the major cases talking about all these rights, like case Kuppaswamy versus Union of India. You heard of this case. It is also known as Aadhaar card case. This is a case which talk about right to privacy. Olga Tallis versus Bombay Municipal Corporation is a case of right to livelihood. Here the court had that there is a right to livelihood and the state must provide a minimum livelihood to every person. Then Aruna Ramchandra Shanbag versus Union of India. This is a case of right to die. Right to die with dignity is our fundamental right, not right to die. There are two things which are commonly, it is confuse us, but it is not, we do not have to confuse in this thing. Right to die with dignity is a fundamental right. That's why committing suicide is still a crime. Now, Aruna Ramchandra Shanbag case, the Supreme Court said that passive euthanasia is our fundamental right. And that is also in rarest cases by taking permission from judiciary, from judicial court. Then only we can apply that passive euthanasia. There also have a several restriction. Now, we came to know about Article 21A, right to education, after by some amendment. So Article 21A talk about right to education. It is also a fundamental right. This right gives all children the age to 6 to 14 years compulsory and free education. It is inserted by 86th Amendment, was included in Article 45 of DPSP, and we had taken it from there, Directive Principles of State Policy. And it is said in Unni Krishnan versus State of Andhra Pradesh is a landmark judgment for this particular article. It said about that free and compulsory education to all the children aged 6 to 14 years. Now, my last article which I will be covering is Article 22, Protection Against Arrest and Detention. This article is for safeguards. It provides safeguards, protection against arrest and detention. That is arbitrary arrest and detention. So what are safeguards if you get arrested? What are your rights? All these things this article talk about. There are two things you must to know about if we talk about this article. What are they? Punitive detention and preventive detention. Punitive detention is like detention under an ordinary law. What I mean to say, if I committed murder and I got arrested, then it is a punitive detention because after a crime I am getting arrest, and that is under an ordinary law. That means IPC or some other these type of laws. And it is covered in 22 clause 1 and 22 clause 2. But in preventive detention, it means that that safeguards that are provided to us in Preventive Detention Acts. Preventive detention means that before you committed a crime, just a thing that the state want to prevent you to commit that crime. That's why you get arrested. So this is preventive detention. Prevent that person to commit a crime that is going to be committed, not yet committed. So this can be done only under the laws, especially formed by Parliament, Preventive Detention Act. This is given in Article 22 clause 3 and 22 clause 4 to 22 clause 7 provide safeguards for it. Now, in short, learning all these, punitive detention has three things which come under right to be informed of ground of arrest. You have a right to be informed for why you got arrested, and this is also cited in Joginder Kumar versus State of UP. To consulted and defended by legal practitioners, it is your right. And Husainara Khatun versus Home Secretary, Supreme Court said that if a person is not able to have that legal practitioner, it is economically weak, then the state has to provide a free legal practitioners in free. Now, there is third, which is also can taken in some other way, like it is your right to be produced before magistrate 24 hours of arrest, or it can be taken as you have to be produced there, otherwise no arrest can be taken after 24 hours if you are not produced before magistrate within 24 hours. So in CBI versus Anupam J Kulkarni, it is said that it is mandatory to produce before magistrate within 24 hours of arrest, but magistrate also can order for that police custody plus judicial custody for maximum 15 days if investigation is not completed. So these all talk about punitive detention. Now preventive detention is only in India. This is a very interesting that in India only we apply as in ordinary times. Otherwise in UK and USA, there are provision of preventive detention, but at the time of emergency. Now here, to detain person without trial, there is no trial in this thing, and it can also be taken as like for some kind of revenge, but it must be taken as good, but it can be taken as that because it has a no without trial. No such thing in UK and USA I mentioned, and 22(4) to 22(7) provide safeguards for it. There are some things mentioned here. No detention beyond 3 months unless approved by advisory board. Authority must communicate grounds soon as possible. Earliest opportunity to detain you to make representation against the order, and no detention beyond maximum period prescribed under law. So these are the things which must be, which is important, which is safeguards given in preventive detention. So this is all for right to freedom. And now for the next speaker to speak on right to against exploitation and right to religion. Thank you.
Far we have seen right to equality, which is from Article 14 to 18, and right to freedom, that is from 19 to 22. Now let's move forward and look upon other rights. Next, we have right against exploitation, which is covered under Article 23 to 24. So talking about right against exploitation, which is covered under Article 23 and 24. Under this head, there are two heads which I can say, that is prohibition of traffic in human beings and prohibition of forced labor. So talking about prohibition of traffic in human beings, that is selling and buying of men and women like chattels, like goods, which include immoral traffic in women and children for immoral and other purposes. The second is prohibition of forced labor. This includes begar. What is begar? Begar is involuntary work without payment. So prohibition of forced labor, this is inclusive of begar. Besides that, there can be any form of forced labor which indulge a man in involuntary work without his or her will, even if he gets the remuneration. So Article 23 talks about traffic in human being, and second, forced labor. The second part of it talks about if there is a violation between the two, it will be against the right against exploitation, and you will be breaking the Article 23. You will be violating Article 23 specifically. The second clause talks about voluntary services. This is an exception to it. So if in this, the state is empowered to give in order to involve citizen in the voluntary services. By voluntary services, if I like to give an example, then it could be military services or social services. Then in that case, that will not covered under the form of forced labor, and it will not be the violation of Article 23 because its clause 2 talks about exception of Article 23. Talking about prisoners, there can be imprisonment of two types, that is rigorous imprisonment and simple imprisonment. In rigorous imprisonment, the prisoners are followed some labors against which they get certain kind of remuneration. So the question here is that will they can deny that remuneration part? So the answer is no. Prisoners have the right to get the remuneration for the labor they have done. The same is being held in Dina versus Union of India, in which it was held that labor taken from prisoners without proper remuneration was forced labor and violation of Article 23. In looking at more case laws, in People's Union for Democratic Right versus Union of India, the Supreme Court considered the scope and the ambit of Article 24 in detail. This article strikes at forced labor in whatever form it may manifest. As I already told you, forced labor is inclusive of bega, that is involuntary work. Even if the person does not get remuneration, then also it will be categorized under Article 23 and will be the violation of it. One more thing I would like to tell you that Article 23 is available against state as well as individual. So the next question arises is how this is available against individual. So for when it is available against state, the remedy is available according to Article 32. We can go against Supreme Court, and as per Article 226, we can approach High Court for the specific remedies. But what if an individual exploits or do certain kind of forced labor or traffic in human beings? Then where the person can approach? So then the parliamentary acts come into place. For example, Article 17 that talks about untouchability, that also is available against state as well as against individual. So parliamentary acts are there. For example, in untouchability, there is a Protection of Civil Liberty Act, which makes an individual which stops an individual against such kinds of discrimination, that is untouchability and certain kind of Devdasi system which was prevalent in South India. Okay, so let's talk about Article 24. So Article 24 talks about prohibition of employment of children in factories, etc. So the question arises here is that only in hazardous or in non-hazardous factories. So when this article was made, the contention of the constitution makers was with regard to the children employment in hazardous activities. But when the time, with the moving of time, it was felt that the children are employed in non-hazardous activities also, and that is snatching away their so-called childhood. So there is whole story behind this. The story is that during the Britishers' time, the British also dealt with the word child, and they defined child, that is any child below the age of 15 years in hazardous activities will be fall under this category. But with the moving of time, we changed this law, that is CLPR Act, that is Child Labor Prohibition and Regulation Act, and we reduced the age to 14 years. An amendment was made which include hazardous activities as well as non-hazardous activities. But what happened is that most of the employment of children was in family-owned businesses or family-owned farms. So when this amendment was made, the law sagged down. Nobody followed that law. Why? As I already told you, there are many children. It is being contended that they will be helping hands in family-owned businesses or family-owned farms. So, and 2012 amendment was made 2012 amendment was attached with the Right to Education Act of 2009, which says that in hazardous activities, you cannot employ children at the age of 14, below the age of 14 years. But in non-hazardous activities, only in school, only after the school hours or in their summertime. Looking at the case laws, the first case laws here is that MC Mehta versus State of Tamil Nadu. In this, the Supreme Court held that the children below the age of 14 years cannot be employed in any hazardous industries, mines, or other work. This led to the setting up of Child Labor Rehabilitation Welfare Fund. According to this, it ensured two alternatives for the employer which employ these children. First, either they can give alternative employment for the adult whose name and the child suggests, particular child is concerned. And second thing is that they should, if the alternative employment cannot be provided by the employer, then a sum of 25,000 it deposited in the fund for the fund of the children, and 5,000 can be deposited by the state. Insofar as I've already told you, in non-hazardous activities as concerned, the working hours of the child should not be more than 4 to 6 years. That will also, that is after the school hours, and it receives education for at least 2 hours each day. Education is the context which the government focused on. After exploitation, let's look right to freedom of religion, which is covered under Article 25 to 28. Okay, so my question here is that what is secularism? Do our secularism distinguish from the Western secularism that they follow, or the US doctrine of secularism? Yes, there is a distinguish between both of them, because we have our own definition of secularism. First, I would like to tell you the Western definition of secularism. According to the Western definition of secularism, there is no divorce between state and religion. That is, imagine for yourself, there is a state and this is a religion. Okay. So there is no a wall or a separation wall between them which distinguish between the state and religion. State will not interfere no matter what you do. You discriminate on the name of religion, you do. State will never interfere in the name of religion. But we have our own definition of secularism. That is, in normal context, the state will not interfere in the name of religion, in the matter of religion. But if within the religion, there is discrimination on the name of religion, there is enmity, there is a disturbance on the name of religion, then the state will interfere. This is called the watchful ambivalence. The state is looking on you. The state will not tolerate this because it is against the violation of right to freedom of religion. Because in practicing your own religion, you cannot disturb you cannot disturb the religious practices or the religious sentiments of other religion. That is what the context of our secularism means. Going forward, let's see the secularism interpretation by the court. In SR Bombay versus Union of India, the Supreme Court has held that secularism is the basic feature of the Constitution. So secularism is already being defined in preamble, which says to secure the faith worship and which says to secure the liberty, thought, and expression of the citizen. So in SR Bombay versus Union of India, the Supreme Court held that secularism is the very basic feature of the Constitution. Secularism is not anti-God nor pro-God. State is not defined to any one religion. That is, state का कोई अपना religion नहीं है. अगर आपको इस्लाम फॉलो करना, आप इस्लाम फॉलो करो. अगर आपको हिंदुइज्म फॉलो करना, आप हिंदुइज्म फॉलो करो. आपको Christianity फॉलो करनी, आप Christianity फॉलो करो. State will not interfere because it is your own personal matter. So it is not anti-God nor pro-God. If you are a devotee, do that. If you don't want to follow any religion, you do that. State will not interfere, but discrimination is not allowed. In Aruna Roy versus Union of India, in this, the validity of new education policy 2002 was challenged. The court held that the study of religion in school education is not against the secular philosophy of the constitution. In studying the various context of the education, this will lead to the unity of various religion. So this is not hampering the secular philosophy of the constitution or whatsoever. Now let's look what actually is religion. So if I tell you the term religion is not defined in constitution nowhere, but Supreme Court has defined it very widely. So if I talk about religion, it is the Supreme Court has said it is the matter of personal belief and personal faith, which can also be defined as doctrine of faith and belief. But to say only a doctrine of faith and belief, it will not be correct, because it has certain kinds of rituals, the manners, the modes of worship, even the cloth and the dressing sense is being teach in the certain religious in certain religion. So the meaning of religion is very wide. There is no certain what we can say categories under which the religion is defined. So we can say this fall under the category of religion, or that context will fall under the category of religion. So let's look at some of the cases. In this case, the Bijoy Emmanuel versus State of Kerala, famously known as National Anthem case. On appeal, the Supreme Court reserved the High Court decision. This matter was that the three students of the Jojoba Christian community belief, they were expelled out of the school because they were not singing the national anthem. They reached the High Court and said this is violating their right to religion, practice their religion. So the High Court was not in favor of them. But when on the appeal, when the Supreme Court reserved the High Court decision and said that no person can be compelled to sing the national anthem. According to the students, the context was that according to the Jojoba belief of the Christianity, they're not allowed to be the part of any other religious community. They can only sing their prayer of Jojoba, that is their God. So, but they are standing in respect of national anthem. The Supreme Court said that they are standing in respect of national anthem. That is enough. Singing, you cannot compel a person to sing the national anthem if he has a genuine, conscientious religious objection. Also, non-Brahmins can be appointed as pujari in temple. This was held in Aditya versus Travancore Devaswam Board. Acquisition of place of worship. So, the state has empowered to take certain places of worship for the public purposes. This the same has been held in Islam Farooqi versus Union of India. Shifting of property connected with religion. So if a state shifts certain kind of religious temples or mosque, if there is any threat between two communities, or there is certain kind of fight between two communities, then shifting of property can be done with religion. This has been held in Ghulam Abbas versus State of UP. The famous triple talaq case, which is connected with talaq-e-biddat, that is held to be unconstitutional according to Islamic provisions. That was held in Shaira Bano versus Union of India. Why talaq-e-biddat? If I say that talaq-e-biddat is considered a bad form of talaq, why? Because there is no scope of reconciliation of marriages. So according to Islamic religion, it is a very bad form of talaq. That's why in its own religion, it is considered not good form of religion. And Supreme Court has held that in the matter of triple talaq, that is the instant talaq, is violating the rights of the women, and same is been held in Shaira Banu versus Union of India. The second is noise pollution in the name of religion is not allowed. You can see that the prayers or certain kind of songs, which religious songs, is being chanted in the loudspeaker. That is also not allowed in the name of religion. The same is being held in Church of God, that is the Full Gospel in India versus KKRMC Welfare Association. So now let's look at the articles of the religion. So the Article 25 talks about freedom of conscience and right to profess, practice, and propagate religion. What is conscience? Conscience is the belief which connects you to that of God in whatever form you confess. With freedom of conscience, we have the right to profess our religion, practice our religion, and propagate our religion. Profess means to express expresses widely and openly that you are following that religion. Practice is there are certain kinds of rituals, there are certain kind of modes of worship that you follow, ceremonies you follow in order to practice that religion, right? And to propagate the religion, that means you're spreading your religion for the edification of the others. This right is available to individual, and certainly this is not an absolute right. This has been subjected to certain reasonable grounds of restrictions. This article have 4 reasonable grounds of restriction, that is public order, morality, health, and any other article in part 3. Talking further about this article, the subclause of Article 25 empowers the state to regulate or restrict any economic, financial, political, or any other secular activity which might be associated with religious practice. So it is very difficult to find which religious activities is connected with economic, political, financial, and secular activity associated with religious practice. The second clause talks about, the second subclause talks about in order to provide this, the social welfare and reform, to throw open Hindu religious institution for public character for all classes and sections of Hindus. Hindus will cover Jain, Sikhs, and Buddhists. So there are certain restrictions on Article 25. The first one is, as I already told you, there are 4 restrictions, that is public order, health, and morality. In the name of religion, that is untouchability or traffic in human beings, is Devdasi cannot be tolerated. This is subject to other provision of part 3. Example, right to freedom of speech and expression. So in the name of religion, in the name of religion, or untouchability, or there was Devdasi system which was prevalent, you cannot be you cannot restrict, you cannot practice this certain kinds of dogmas or practices which was prevalent, which was hampering the right to religion, cannot be tolerated. This is also subject to other provisions. For example, forced conversion is not allowed. As I already told you, there you can profess your religion, you can practice your religion, you can propagate your religion. When you propagate your religion, you cannot force anyone or coerce anyone to convert their religion on of your own religion. So it was held, the same was held in Rev Stanislaus versus State of MP, in which legislature prohibiting forcible conversion of one's own religion in the interest of public order can be passed and is valid. The second thing is, the second restriction of Article 25 is regulation of economic, financial, political, and secular activities which is associated with religious practice. As I already told you, it is not easy to say which activity will fall under religious practice and which are of commercial, secular, political nature. We cannot say. So, for example, prohibiting of slaughter of cows. So in Muhammad Hanif Qureshi versus State of Bihar, the court held that the sacrifice of cow on Bakri Day was not an essential practice. So what we have to see is that certain practice is an essential practice or not. If it does not fall under the essential practice of the religion, certainly it will be prohibited by the state. And hence, as I told, it can be prohibited by state if it is discrimination, if it is discriminating, if it is causing enmity, if it is causing disturbance in the society. The third is social welfare and social reforms. Thus, under this clause, state can eradicate any social practices and dogmas. As I already told you, the state is prohibited. The same is being held in State of Bombay versus Barosu Bapamali. In this, it was held that bigamy is not an essential religious practice of Hindu religion. Therefore, it can be regulated by the law. Next thing is that throwing open Hindu religious institutions of public character to all Hindus. In this, the Hindu will be Jain, Sikh, and Buddhist. So, for the matter of public purposes, the state can open Hindu religious institution for the public character. The next is right of sects to wear and carry kirpans. It is the right to this is a certain kind of restriction. They can carry kirpan, but they cannot carry more than one kirpan. And for that too, for carrying kirpan too, you have to obtain a license for it. Now let's move forward to Article 26. Article 26 talks about freedom to manage religious affairs. That is, to establish and maintain institutions for religious and charitable purpose, to manage own affairs in matter of religion, moving and immovable property, to acquire it, and to administer such property in accordance with law. The thing which we have to focus on is religious denomination. Let's take an example. For example, Arya Samaj. Arya Samaj is there is particular community which is following this, right? After that, this is the first point. Okay. The second point is that that community has certain kind of beliefs, essential religious practices which they consider are essential for the welfare of their religion or the belief. The third thing is that they have their unique name from which they are known. And fourth is that they have a particular community in order to recognize them. So if these four things are being followed, then that religion will be considered as religious denomination. Another example would be Islam. Islam also has a particular group of community which follow that. They have their unique name. They have their unique essential religious practices which they follow, which they consider is essential for the welfare of their religion and their faith. And fourth is they recognize under special community. Okay. So this is also subjected to reasonable grounds of restrictions. As in Article 24, we have 4 grounds of restriction, that is public order, morality, health, and any other article in Part 3. What is missing here is there is no any other article in Part 3. So there are only 3 grounds of restriction. Talking about Article 27. So state cannot force you to pay taxes in the favor of any religion, for favoring any particular religious practices or to promote any religion. This is not inclusive of fees. This is inclusive of levy of taxes, but this does not include fees. The same is being held in Ratilal versus State of Bombay. The Supreme Court held that tax is a nature of compulsory extraction for public authority for public purposes. Whereas fees, on the other hand, are the payments primarily in public interest, but for special services which are rendered for special work for your own benefit, from whom the payment is being demanded. For that particular person only, the fees is being made. So fees will not cover under the head under the Article 27. Only the taxes in the name of religion for maintaining for promoting any particular religion, this will prohibit such activities. Talking about Article 28. So Article 28 talks about freedom from attending religious instructions. So religious instructions can be given by religious denomination, as I already told you, in which I gave example of Arya Samaj, Islam, etc. So education institutions are of 4 types. First is institutions which are wholly maintained by state. Second is institution recognized by the state. The third is institution that are received aid out of the state fund. And fourth is institution that are administered by the state but are established under any trust or endowment. In the first category, no religious instructions can be imparted because it is wholly maintained by the state. You do not have any control. Institution which is recognized by the state may be partially. In this, religious instructions can be made, may be imparted, but with the consent of the individuals, or if the individual is minor, with the consent of their parents. Institutions that are received aid out of the state fund, the same is being applied as that of the second one. And the last, that is administered by the state but established under any trust or endowment. In this category, no religious instructions can be imparted by the state. From this, we come to the end of the article, that is right to religion. Further, it will be proceeded by my friend. Thank you.
Everyone. So today my topic will be on Article 29, 30 and 32, which will pertain to basically on the cultural and educational right, which has been enshrined in the constitutional law. So what is constitutional law? We have already discussed so far, so I will just brief it out. It is a body of law which defines role, powers, and structure of different entities within a state. So, and it has not that all countries have its own constitution. It is only some, like US, India, and Singapore. They have their own constitution, and it is a part of the statute. So it is basically what has been described in the constitution that has to be enforced directly. So it is not like it is unlike the common law system where it is where the basis is on the precedence of the judges. So that's the basic basic brief about the constitutional law, which is also similar in the lines of the Indian constitutional law. So now what are cultural and educational rights? So these cultural and educational rights are basically in the Article 29 and 30 of Indian Constitution. So it guarantees basic rights to the citizens, that is to preserve their culture, and to the minority groups, and also they help in enforcing their educational rights. So culture means that people have their own, suppose I being an Assamese, someone being an Marathi, someone being a Punjabi, they have all their rights to prosper their culture and traditions as per their own will. And they have also a right to establish their education institutions so that they can prosper and foster their culture as per their own will. And state believes that there should not be no restriction for the same. So we know that the Indian society is known for its diversity among the unity. So we have a lot of minorities as well as the cultural groups across India. So these rights to minorities and the diversity are preserved and provide avenues for all groups, including the marginalized ones also, and preserve, propagate, and foster their culture. So now this is just a pictorial representation of the fundamental right, which is cultural and educational rights. So, and yeah. So Article 29, which is the first article describing this fundamental right. So it has 2 subsections. Article 29(1) that provides that all citizen groups that reside in India having a distinct culture, language, and script the right to conserve their culture and language. This right is absolute and there is no reasonable restriction in the interest of general public there. So as we know, the basic, so previously we have seen many articles, they have certain restriction imposed upon them. But here it is not, it is one of the article where there is basically there is no reasonable restriction has been imposed. So people can practice these rights as per their own will. However, if that occurs a large extent to the public threat or security of the country, then obviously then certain restrictions can be imposed. And Article 29(2), the state also cannot deny admission into educational institution maintained by it and those that receive aid from it or any person based on race, religion, caste, language. This right is given to individual and not to any community. So that means that state, suppose I being a minority group wants to take admission in a reputed institution or any institution by government, then someone cannot deny my education on the basis of the race or class which I may belong to. Suppose they cannot say that you belong to this community, so I won't grant you admission. So that has been prohibited under this Article 29(2) of the subsection. So talking about the case laws related to Article 22, that is Aziz Basha versus Union of India. The Supreme Court held that if an education institute has not been established by minority community, then they have no right to administer it. And also the second case is Dr. Naresh Agarwal versus Union of India. So in this type of case that the court has took inspiration from the previous case, that is Aziz Basha versus Union of India case. Here the Aligarh Muslim University, they made a policy that 50% of the seats will belong to a general reservation, that is SC, ST and STs, and other 50% will belong to the Muslim community. This was challenged actually by a Hindu student which was willing to take admission in that institution. So court then put down this system and told that this kind of reservation cannot happen because it can violate Article 29 and go against the interest of the other minority groups. So that is basically the basic philosophy of Article 29. Now talking about Article 30. Article 30 of the Indian Constitution states the rights of minorities to establish and administer educational institution. So this is an, so first part we have seen 29 is to prosper their culture, and now this where education of such culture can happen without any restriction. It says that all minorities, whether based on religion or language, shall have rights to establish and administer education institution of their choice. So there cannot be any restrictions. Also, Article 30 of the Indian Constitution consists of provisions that safeguard various rights of minority community in the country, keeping in mind the principles of equality as well. So here also so it can be seen that the equality is very well maintained in this article. So Article 4, in the name of Article 30, Article 14 or like Article 21, which are basic core of the Constitution or the fundamental rights, that cannot be violated. So Article 30 and Article 14, right to equality before law, should go hand in hand rather than competing against each other. Also there in Article 30, it indirectly implies two types of minorities, that is religious minority and linguistic minorities. So religious minority is basically in India, we know that the most of the majority of people belong to the Hindu community. And similarly in the state of Pakistan or Saudi Arabia, that is the Muslim community. So those which do not fall under this majority of the majority community falls under the minority, that is religiously minority. Suppose in India, we can talk about the Christianity or like Judaism or Parsis, they all belong to the smaller community. And talking about the other one, linguistic minority, we can take the example of the state of Tripura. So Tripura, there was basically the Tripurari people of that Tripurari people are now considered as a minority linguistic group in the place of the Bengalis. So due to the establishments of many institutions like Bengalis by Bengalis and their invasion from Bangladesh as well, Tripurari people are now the most of the minority group in that state. So government is also trying to administer their rights of the minority group under Article 30 of the Indian Constitution. So secondly, now that too was basically Article 30 and 29, which talks about administering cultural and educational rights. So now secondly, I will talk about the Article 32. It is actually, without this article, no single fundamental rights can be enforced. So otherwise they will just be in the written, but the actual practice is brought by Article 32. So it has been rightly said by Dr. Ambedkar, which is known as the father of Indian Constitution, that Article 32 is nothing but the heart and soul of fundamental rights. So only with this type of article, that all the other fundamental rights can be enforced very efficiently. So Article 32 of Indian Constitution gives the right to individual to move to Supreme Court to seek justice when they feel that their right has been unduly deprived. And the protector and guarantor, it is nothing but the protector and guarantor of the fundamental right. So it will just guarantee that you, as a person who has been deprived of a fundamental rights, we can straight away go to court and seek remedy. So under Article 32, the Parliament can also entrust any other court to exercise the power of Supreme Court, provided that it is within its jurisdiction. So Supreme Court can authorize any other court subordinate to its jurisdiction, and can so that it can easily administer this practice of Article 32. So the basic, which is the most efficient element of this article, is that it allows any individual, whether me or even suppose a great lawyer, it doesn't differentiate between anything. And so that any person can straight away go into the court with some, if their fundamental rights has been violated, and Supreme Court will decide according to the same. So for that method of practice of the propagation, and while they go to a Supreme Court, most of the weapon, it can be said as a weapon that can be regarded for the practice of this article, is the writs. So Supreme Court and High Court have writ jurisdiction, which under which the people can issue one writ against another and ensure that the fundamental rights is propagated. So the writs under this Article 32 has been mentioned as number one is habeas corpus. So it is the most important writ for personal liberty, which says that you have the body. The main purpose of this writ is to seek relief for unwanted, unlawful and unwanted detention of an individual. Suppose if I have been detained by any authority, whether lawful or unlawful, then I can easily, me or on my behalf some other person, my parental or quasi-parental authority, can easily go into the court and seek remedy under this writ of habeas corpus. It is nothing but the protection of Article 19, 21 and 22 of the Constitution. So every elements of Article 19, 20 and 22 are combined together in this writ, and it is put under to practice under this. So everyone can know its importance and its power in the court of law. This writ provides immediate relief in case of unlawful detention. That it does not miss anything. That okay, you have been detained, wait for 2 or 3 days, then no. No, the court will just give immediate relief to the unlawful detention. But the detention has to be unlawful and without any lawful justification. Secondly, the second writ is quo warranto. Quo warranto means by what means? This writ is invoked in cases of public offices, and it is used to restrain a person from acting in public office that he is not entitled to it. For suppose suppose police is faking his authority and he is practicing something which is he's not entitled to. So one person may easily issue this writ of quo warranto, and court of law can easily act on its against that person. It cannot be, however, there is a restriction that it cannot be issued against an administrator who is appointed by the government to manage municipal corporation after its dissolution. Even the appointment of public officers can be challenged by any person irrespective of the fact whether his fundamental or legal right has been infringed or not. Suppose if there is a public officer and I have certain suspicious that he is a corrupt or has some criminal background, so easily I can challenge the appointment with the help of quo warranto. That I can, by what means, so I can raise the question, by what authority or by what means have you been selected? So it is basically that type of powerful writ that has been enshrined under our constitution. So, and the second is mandamus. Writ of mandamus means we command. In the basic is we command, that we give you the order. This writ is issued for correct performance of mandatory and purely ministerial duty, and it is issued by a superior court to a lower court or a government officer. So now if we can see its element, it is mean that it can be administered by a superior court to a lower court or a government officer. So there are two elements. The one is lower court or a government officer. So if suppose we take one, the lower court, like one high court or one district magistrate court or any court is not acting as per what is expected to, or if he's crossing the boundary. And secondly, a government officer, suppose a government officer is becoming day by day corrupt and he's taking advantage of his authority and for suppressing the basic voice of the people or basic fundamental interest of the general public. So then the superior court, suppose if we take the lower court as district magistrate and the superior court as high court, the high court may issue writ mandamus and may stop that person from acting that authority. However, there is also one restriction that, however, this writ cannot be issued against president or governor. So these are the two basic bodies under which they cannot be issued under. So the basic purpose is to ensure that the powers and duties are not misused by the administration or executive and are fulfilled duly. Also safeguard the public from the misuse of authority of the administrative bodies as well. So administrative bodies are also not an exception for issuing magistrate. Administrative bodies like certain types of statutory bodies, like we see that election commission now, or any like information commission. These are certain administrative bodies under which the mandamus can be issued. And the second is the certiorari. Writ certiorari means that is to be certified. It is issued when there is a wrongful exercise of jurisdiction and the decision of case is based on. The writ can be moved to higher courts like higher courts or Supreme Court by the affected party. It means that you have to be certified for doing certain actions, and otherwise there cannot be it cannot be enforced. So if there is an exercise of long jurisdiction by the lower court, then this type of writ petition is issued by the higher court, basically the Supreme Court or the High Court. These type of writs are actually made for the proper administration of justice by the lower court, because they are run by people that are not so expert as those run by the high court, because district magistrate or support a judge magistrate, they are most likely to do more wrong than the people of high court or the Supreme Court, because they have a lot more experience than the lower court. So these type of writs ensures that there is proper administration of justice. And second is prohibition. It is a writ directing the lower court to stop doing something which law prohibits from doing. The main purpose is to prevent the inferior court from exceeding its jurisdiction or from exceeding contrary to the natural justice. So here comes the natural justice. If the administration of justice is like that, it is going out of the bounds of the natural justice, then the higher court may prohibit it. So natural justice is basically those which are conferred by the nature. It comes under the natural law jurisprudence, which tells that no person no rights can be violated which has been born by the nature, or which has birthright. Suppose right to life comes under the natural justice. So no court can go against those administration of natural justice. They can differ in their decisions, but certain which are prima facie violative to the natural justice, that cannot be done by the lower court. Now, regarding this distinction, these writs, petitions, and culture and educational rights, there are certain other remedies, short remedies that do not fall under the purview of fundamental rights, but these are known for better understanding of the fundamental rights. So these are Article 33, 34, and 35. So 33 tells that parliamentary may by means determine as to what extent a right conferred part 3 shall in the application to the member of the armed force, the member of the forces charged with the maintenance of public order, the person employed in the bureau or organization established by a state or for purpose of intelligence or counterintelligence, or person employed in or in connection with the telecommunication system set up by the purposes of force, bureau, or organization referred to as N2C. So it means that it gives parliament may lead to decisions as to what extent these fundamental rights can be applicable to the entire nation. So there are certain people where all fundamental rights cannot be enforced. Suppose we can say about the convicts or the prisoners. They're all types of fundamental rights cannot be enforced to them, or the member of the armed force. Member of the armed force also all types of fundamental rights cannot be conferred as they are conferred to the nature citizen, because armed force, we know they have hands in their arms and ammunition. They are more likely to take advantage of their fundamental rights. So people, so mainly the parliament can curb their decision in determining up to what extent their fundamental rights should be practiced and how an ordinary citizen must practice. The members of the force charged with the maintenance of public order. So maintenance of public order, certain like police officers, they also are not what type of right their fundamental rights can be increased. Suppose a police officer, the right to take life can be increased in case of self-defense, but not an ordinary citizen. A person employed in a bureau or organization system under the state for the purpose of intelligence or counterintelligence. We see that now the Disaster Management Act, these are certain bureau that comes under this subsection, this clause C. So they have also fundamental rights can be increased or decreased. And person employed or connection with telecommunication systems set up for the purpose of force, bureau, or organization. Basically, these are the international organizations or the basic intelligence organization which are working with hand in hand with the workforces. So there certain types of privacy they can maintain, whereas the in citizens they cannot maintain. So right to privacy can be set as an example for this. And second, and the next article is Article 34, the restriction on rights conferred on this part while martial laws is in force in any area. The Parliament may by law indemnify any person in the service of the union or the state or any other person in respect of any act done by him in connection with the maintenance or restoration of order in any area within the territory of India where martial law is in force or validated, any any sentence passed, punishment inflicted, or forfeiture ordered, or any other act done under martial law in such area. So here the basic idea of martial laws comes into effect. Martial laws are nothing but the military law which are applicable to the country. We know that the martial courts are where the main army officers are trial for their wrongs or justification of rights. So here also the parliament may by law identify any person in the service of, so in the union or state, the person can identify. That means that identify means that to make something good of what wrong he has committed. So here the parliament may act as a means to identify that person. Secondly, the other related remedy, and the last one is Article 35. The power it gives that parliament shall have and the legislator of the state shall not have power to make laws with respect to the matters under clause 3 of Article 16, clause 3 of Article 32 and 33 and 34 may be provided for prescribing punishment of those acts which is declared to the offense under this act, and parliament shall, as soon as may be after the commencement of this constitution, make laws for prescribing punishment or acts as the subclause 2. Any law in force immediately before the commencement of this constitution in the India. So here, basically, the power is divided between the parliament and the state legislature. We know that there is a house of legislature in every state. So certain types of laws can be only put forward and can be made by parliament and not by the legislature of law. So basic philosophy between is maintaining a homogeneity in the practice of the in such type of crucial elements of fundamental rights. Suppose we take the example of right to life. If we confer the this type of law on state government and state government can formulate any type of law basis of this, then now in my state, in my town, a crime can be regarded as a death penalty. But in other state, that same cannot be enforced as a death penalty. So this will create a lot of chaos. To bring uniformity in this type of serious matter, so the parliament is only provided with the power to formulate the laws of these kind of crucial elements, like mentioned, like clause 3 of article 16, clause 3 of article 32 and 33 and 34, so that they cannot be misused by the state government. Only and only the power parliament, that means the central government for entire nation, has to formulate that type of law. So that's all I have to say. And for those minorities which belong outside the people, our violation of Article 9 that belongs to the India, that in a certain type of hypothesis, I would like to say, where one cannot come up to a question, solution, sorry, and there is a lot of debate going on according to state, and also article right to secularism as well. So these two rights works on hand in hand, and I feel that Supreme Court, while deciding upon the matter, should hear both the cases and should always found out a best way where the promotion, there should be no question of violation of this article, and all the fundamental rights should be propagated hand in hand and in the best effective manner. That's all I would like to say. Thank you.
Thank you everyone for your patience hearing. We wish that you will gain something from our that fundamental rights session. Thank you.